Welcome to the Faith Forum, a series of talks with leading thinkers, best-selling authors, business leaders, philosophers, artists, and theologians of our time. We're so happy you've joined us, and we hope this podcast offers food for your spiritual journey. From Christ Episcopal Church in Charlotte, North Carolina, I'm the Reverend Chip Edens, and this is the Faith Forum.
All right, friends, we're going to get started here in just a moment. Our live stream is getting ready to begin, and we have people gathering with us online right now. And in just a second, we're gonna get started. But we are so glad that you are here with us today for this important conversation as we continue in the season of Eastertide. I've said this many times before, and we practice it as a church, that the concept of resurrection is far too big and important of a context for us just to celebrate it on one day, right? And so in the wisdom of our tradition, we spend 50 days celebrating resurrection. And so it's important that we continue to invite people in who can help us think about both the practicalness and the expansiveness of what it means to be resurrected people who live the story of the gospel in that kind of a way. Today, for this conversation, I am very excited to have a conversation with my friend and colleague, the Reverend Dr. Paul Wallace. Paul, welcome. We're glad that you are here.
Thank you.
Paul is we can give him a hand. Let's go. We'll start that way. Always good to start with the applause.
There you go.
Right?
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, take it while I can get it.
It's fine. It's fine. Paul is a teacher, pastor, scientist, writer, and speaker. He currently teaches physics and astronomy at Agnes Scott College in Decatur, Georgia, and recently served as a pastor for adult education at the First Baptist Church in Decatur. Paul writes and speaks at the intersection of faith and science, and while this topic often gets boggled down in conflict and jargon and high-mindedness, I think is a way that we can talk about it. Isn't that kind of high-mindedness?
Woolly-headedness. Woolly-headedness.
Woolly-headedness, yes. Paul loves and does a great job, both with wit and with great depth of insight to make it practical for us non-science, non-physics kind of people, right? So, Paul, thank you, and we're glad that you're here. The good news for everybody in the room is that Paul was not born an astrophysicist, correct, Paul?
That's correct.
Right, okay. You were not...
A baby like all the rest of them.
Just a baby like all the rest of us. Tell us a little bit about growing up and a little bit about your faith community. I know you're a self-proclaimed science nerd from a very early age. Say a little bit about how science growing up for you became a part of your faith journey.
Well, it kind of starts with my dad, who was a professor of engineering at Georgia Tech, and we had a lot of science books around the house. You know, we had like Carl Sagan's Cosmos came out when I was 12. That was probably the thing I could point to that really opened my eyes up. I came face to face through all these books laying around the house. Carl Sagan's Cosmos, and also, I don't know if any of you remember this, but there was a series of Time Life books on science that was put out at the time, and one of them was on natural history. You know, and I came face to face with this geologic timeline it astounded me. It completely floored me. I knew that there had been dinosaurs before people. That's all I had really known. But I had never really appreciated the vast gulf of time that existed between them and us, and the even more incomprehensible amount of time that had come to pass before the dinosaurs ever showed up. And this timeline was really a thing of great elegance, and it really sucked me in, and it also kind of scared me. It really, you know, I was only like 10 when I came across this, and it really put. And now I have the term, you know, existential angst to put on it. At the time I was 10, of course, I didn't. But that really opened me up to the possibility of just the limitless size of the universe and the depths of time. But my dad was also like Mr. Church. You know, every time the church doors open, we were at church. I was one of the, total church nerds, and I loved church. I loved it, and at church they gave me a different book, right, which had a different timeline in it, and I was like, and I read it. There's no dinosaurs in here. I checked the natural history book. There's no Adam and Eve in here. I looked for them, right there on the timeline. I looked in the index for them. Nope, Adam and Eve not there. So, that's how it started. But I never really, when I read Carl Sagan's book, I totally believed it. Something about it resonated with something deep in me, and I totally believed it, and it really scared me and kind of thrilled me too.
So it sounds to me like the context in which you grew up was a context within which this sort of juxtaposition or the sort of non-allied enemies of science and faith were actually comfortably in the room together.
Right.
And the family in which you grew up and the church in which you grew up sort of didn't sort of naysay the fact that these realities might exist together.
Right,
but created a context within which you could be curious.
Right. They never really, Dad was never really interested in the topic science and religion. But he made it open. He made it clear that both of these things were real. Most of these things were deeply important. And gave me space to explore it without any fear of, being wrong or whatever.
Now, you first got your PhD in physics, correct?
Right.
In physics, right? And and you and I met when we were both pursuing ongoing theological education at the Candler School of Theology in Emory.
We were the same year.
We were. And so the fascinating thing about that is that you had this sort of already established career. I found out today, for those of you that didn't know, Paul taught for a brief time at Hampton-Sydney College. So for any of you Hampton-Sydney College people there, we just discovered this. He and Chip had a good laugh in the corridor. So you had this already established career in science, and yet, even as an adult and successfully doing what you were doing, you were still curious.
I was still curious.
And it was not, the questions had not been answered. And so you say a little bit about this journey into doing master's work in theology as an already professor of...
Yes, I taught at a college, Berry College, which is a college in Rome, Georgia. I taught there for 10 years, and I was, I went through college, and I had these great, phenomenal teachers, and I decided, hey, that looks like a good job, being a professor at a small college, because it's kind of a real job, but you can also be kind of, weird, right? Am I right? I mean, really, both things happen at the same time, so I thought that's something I could do, and so I jumped through all the flaming hoops, and I got my PhD. Then I got the job at a college, and I got tenured, and you can look at it one way as just a spectacular midlife crisis. But also, I did feel very much, I remember sitting in my office one day and looking at my bookshelf. And it was, physics and astronomy and a little bit of religion stuff over here. And over time, it became clear that I could not stay where I was. I simply could not stay. I could not do it. And the stars lined up for the family. The kids were young enough. Elizabeth.
Was that a pun? Was that pun intended? The stars lined up?
I just talk that way.
Okay. Yeah.
And so it worked out for the family. But I did feel very much like there was a piece missing. Put it that way.
Yeah. And so that piece missing led you into that context of pursuing master's work in theology.
At Candler.
And was it a question that you were trying to answer? Was there mystery missing? What was it that led you to say, like, theology? I mean, there's a whole other realm of places.
I had always messed with the idea, and I had been part of several churches, and the one in Farmville at Hampton-Sydney, Virginia, actually, a woman looked at me and said, Paul, you should go to seminary. Whether she should have said that or not, I don't know, but it stuck with me. And my wife Elizabeth, was open to it. But the science itself wasn't sufficient. Put it that way for me.
Yeah.
It just wasn't. It just didn't. I think you mentioned an unanswered question, and I think that's an accurate description of it. I'm not sure what the question was exactly, but I felt a real deep drive and an itch.
Yeah. It's
go
amazing
that
how that
direction.
happens in all of our journeys, isn't it? That we can, that someone's throwaway comment in the midst of our day about a deep question that we have in our hearts or in our lives or about a challenge that we're facing can resonate so deep that it can utterly unsettle us and lead us into a whole new
And
realm.
it just dug deeper. It wouldn't let me go.
Yeah, and I think that's one of the things that as we could get as lofty or woolly-headed about this conversation as we wanted to, but at the end of the day, it's that sort of intimate awareness of God's presence with us in this vast, in the words of the prayer book, vast expanse of interstellar space that is really at the heart of what we're talking about, right? It is that we and God and cosmos are on a journey together, and it can be as many fathomless sort of light years. Oh, how close is the nearest star?
4 light years. 4.2.
4.2 light years away. Okay, great. So it can be as far and expansive as the nearest star, 4.2, how many?
4.2 light years.
Light years away. Or as intimate as a person making a comment to us at church that utterly can change and embrace and open us up to the mystery of God in our lives. Now, one of the things that has blown my mind, and you and I talked about this at dinner last night, that has blown my mind is, as it relates to this, is the Skyview app. Okay?
Oh, yeah.
The Skyview app. How many of you know what the Skyview app is? Okay, some of you, I see you. If you have not downloaded the Skyview app onto your phone yet, I strongly encourage you. I did not get the production team back there.
It's free, right?
It's free. You can do the paid version. I've never really done the paid version. But the Skyview app allows you, as it says, to explore the universe. And you take your phone out and you move it around. And I'm not just looking at you all right now, but it allows you to kind of to look around and see what various things are all around you. And the thing that blew my mind the most about it, and this is, I want to talk about your book, The Stars Beneath Us, right? Finding God in the Evolving Cosmos, is that the Skyview app allows you to recognize that there are stars beneath us, right? And that oftentimes we find ourselves walking around on sort of Earth in our day-to-day bumping around lives with each other. But when you take it out and you kind of begin to look, and I do encourage you to do this from time to time, I'm looking at all the stars around us and the ones beneath us, and the Hubble Space Telescope is right down there somewhere right now as we speak. It opens us up, right, to this sort of sense of mystery and to the relationship. Say a little bit about how, in your book, The Stars Beneath Us, and how this sort of sense of faith and science and cosmos working together can help us understand God and can help us understand faith in our everyday lives.
Well, the universe is often overlooked by Christians. Truly, it is. We think very much about the human world, and the dynamics within our own congregations, within our cities, our world, and so forth and so on. But I don't really want. I mean, I do actually want to go into space. I would go if I didn't have a family. I would go, but I wouldn't want to go into just like low Earth orbit. I would like to go to the moon, or out that far. It's dangerous out there. I don't know if you know that about space, but you really don't want to be out there. Okay, it's not just emptiness. It's really hostile. But I would do it for one reason. So I could turn around and see the Earth suspended in space, so small that I could like cover it with my thumb. Because that's real. That is a real perspective, and it is true all the time. Yet most people, frankly, prefer to not think about it. It's unsettling. It's unsettling in the way that it was unsettling when Copernicus started talking about the Earth in motion. People felt like everything's falling apart. And it really does put a new perspective on it, but we need to see ourselves as part of this enormous and beautiful, important word for me, beautiful universe that we live in. And I do think that there are all kinds of theological implications of that perspective. Mostly many things, but mostly along the lines of we have got to take care of ourselves. We have got to take care of our planet. This is a gift. You see it as a gift. You see our lives and our planet as a true gift, because underneath our magnetic fields and underneath our atmosphere, we have such a warm, cozy, beautiful place to live, and it is such an exception. I mean, the degree to which it is an exception is can't be expressed. It is. We have a lovely place here, and we must take care of it and of each other.
And we have to appreciate it as gift. I mean,
it's
that's
a total gift.
That's something that you just said right there that I think is really important, right?
It's a gift.
We know that, a lot of it, you know that to be true in so many different ways. You hear it, it can almost sound trite, that all of life is gift. That the opportunity that we are gathered here today, having this conversation and participating in it in the ways that we are, is gift and grace. But to think about it from that vast sort of cosmic perspective sort of accentuates it even just a little bit more. You make a comment that science doesn't disprove faith; it can actually deepen it. Give some examples of how science has deepened your faith as you've leaned into science more deeply, and even as you've done work in the church in various different settings, with both holding this sort of space for science and theology together.
Yeah, I do believe that science, and people often spend a lot of time trying to, make science and religion fit. Make them find some way that they can be made consistent with each other, some sort of mental puzzle that's to be figured out. And I do agree there's some of that to it, but my own experience is that science is not, in any sense, opposed to faith. And if there is friction, and there is friction, it is a creative friction. It is not a just dead, sort of fruitless friction. The boundaries between the two are where the good things happen, and there's a lot of creativity that happens at that boundary. But beyond that, I really think of science in my life has actually been not just consistent with faith, but it's been an entryway into it. There's this quote from C.S. Lewis that might help
I think we have,
with this.
We have it up here.
It comes from his book called Miracles, and it says this. It says, Lewis wrote, "It is a profound mistake to imagine that Christianity ever intended to dissipate the bewilderment and even the terror, the sense of our own nothingness, which come upon us when we think about the nature of things. Many a man brought up in the glib profession of some shallow form of Christianity who comes through reading astronomy to realize for the first time how majestically indifferent most reality is to man, and who perhaps abandons his religion on that account, may at that moment be having his first genuinely religious experience." This is important to me, not because I think I was brought up in a glib profession of shallow Christianity, and because I never truly rejected my faith. I questioned it, but I never really rejected it. It is important to me because it gives me comfort hearing someone like C.S. Lewis tell me that kind of response is a religious response and orients me towards God. That fear that I had when I was 10 years old of the universe, of my smallness, I never really got into why I was frightened by that geologic timeline. But it just made me feel like a ghost, like I was nothing. Like I was just instantaneously here and then gone. I mean, it's all in the Bible, right? Stuff is not new. I mean, the idea that we are like, our lives come and go like a sigh, from the Psalms. But when you're 10, it's a new idea, and what I can do now is look back at that and realize that that was a religious experience, and it oriented me towards God. And that's what science does. That's what, not just seeing the big picture, right? Not just seeing, time and space on the grandest scale, but also the doing of science and the making of small discoveries. Some of the best moments in my life came when I made tiny little discoveries, part of nature nobody ever noticed before. I wrote it down in a paper, and nobody ever read it, okay? It didn't matter. It didn't matter because I had found a little piece of the universe that nobody had ever noticed before, either on the nuclear scale or on the cosmic scale. And that to me is an act of worship. Without any qualifications. Without any qualifications. That is a true and pure, as true a pure and act of worship as anything I've ever done or said or prayed in a church.
Because it's you living into your vocation.
Right. That's
and
right.
You and God and community with all those who came before you, who led up to the opening for you to be able to make the discoveries that you made.
Right.
And then all of those who will come after you, who do read the papers, right? whether you
I have one that people actually read.
Okay, great. There we go. But I think it goes to show that, again, on the smallest, most intimate level of our lives, finding and grappling with our vocations is critical to the evolution of understanding, but also to our own sort of intimate understanding of how God is alive for us and how God finds joy in our worship of God, both as individuals and as those who were all connected together, right?
Right.
All discoveries are no discoveries happen in a vacuum. Is that a false statement?
No.
Okay. So
yes. No, it is a true statement.
It is a true statement. Thank you. So no discoveries happen in a vacuum. Things are discovered because of that which came before. And in our lives, we live this all the time. We were not born astrophysicists or bankers or lawyers or otherwise, but we came to those vocations in our journey by virtue of our faith-filled relationships with one another and by God's interaction in our lives in real time. The psalmist says, the heavens declare the glory of God. The skies above proclaim God's handiwork. Say a little bit about beauty and about the way in which the universe and the beauty within the universe reflect God. And I'm sure many of you have seen these pictures that have started coming back recently from the new telescope. From the Webb telescope that's going to the outermost edges and maybe it's not the outermost edges, but capturing these images which we're able to say a little bit about beauty.
Oh goodness, I really think that beauty is a divine a divine phenomenon in the world, and it is everywhere. It is everywhere, and that sounds like a cliche, and I get that. But if you look for it, if you open your eyes, I really believe you'll find it. And this is true, not just looking up at the sky, which is did it have to be so beautiful? Did it? No, I don't know. I don't know if it did or not. But there is not one face of nature that is not beautiful. And by beautiful, I don't mean pretty. I don't mean pretty. Pretty is not a strong word. Beautiful is a strong word. I mean, the world is, and I'm stumbling over my words because I really don't know how to say this, but I will try this way. Everywhere I've looked, I've found it. Everywhere I've looked, I've found it. We've all experienced it. It's not. Not talking about something that's not completely universal. It's as simple as, have you ever really looked at a bird? I mean, I'm not talking about some exotic thing you find in Ecuador. I'm talking about the cardinal or the robin that's right outside your window. And have you ever really looked at it? Have you ever really noticed it? Have you ever really noticed its eye, or the way its tail feathers are folded, or the way its talons are, its feet are curved? That's one thing. But beauty runs throughout all scales of the universe, not just the large, not just the medium size like the bird, but also as you go down deep into matter. You've probably heard of the science of quantum mechanics, and I can tell you, it is not what we expected. Quantum mechanics is not what we expected, but it is beautiful. Atoms, nuclei, subnuclear particles. There is an astonishing quality to the world that it is completely run through with it. And I have been unable to satisfactorily separate or to make a distinction in my mind between beauty and God. I just can't do it.
All right, so just for the sake of people who showed up and were really excited about you talking about physics this morning.
Yeah.
Okay. Because I know that people are here and they're like, I want to hear the physics. You're talking about beauty. You're talking about... So give me an example. I know you love the challenge of explaining something in a way that everybody can sort of understand. Talk about the way in which that beauty is manifest to us all the time in the invisible.
In the invisible.
Yeah, in the space between us, in the particles that go unseen.
Oh, you're talking about physics.
Yeah.
Oh.
Yeah. Can you give us a brief example of this? It's okay if people's minds get blown just
I'm not
going to, because my next question is going to be really lighthearted as well. So
I'm not really going to get technical here, but I've always had a fondness for Albert Einstein. As a physicist, of course, I do. But I've had the opportunity this semester, we're just wrapping up our semester, to teach general relativity for the first time. And I tell you, this subject, you see an object fall, you see an apple fall out of a tree, right? And you think, oh, there's an apple falling out of a tree. Simple. Well, it's not as simple as all that. General relativity basically gives you essentially a glimpse at the matrix, right? That's basically what's happening. And you can see that what's actually happening when this apple falls is that the apple is it's not falling. And that's not helpful. And I don't mean to mystify things that don't need to be over-mystified.
Everybody's like, wait a minute, what just happened?
But what I'm saying is that talking about beauty, the beauty of Einstein's theory it has blown my hair back. I've never had to teach it before, but you never learn a thing, of course, until you teach it. And I'm not even sure how well I've learned it this time, teaching it. But the beauty of that theory of gravitation, which is something we all take for granted, of course the apple falls. Why? And why, when you drop an apple, does it fall at the same rate a car would fall? If you took an apple and a 2-ton automobile and dropped them at the same time, they both fall at the same rate. Why? Sounds like a simple question, but when it's one of these simple questions, start digging into it, it gets lovely. It gets really lovely. And it does deepen, science does deepen faith because it just unveils another layer of what creation is, of what God's creation is. And it just, just gives you another glimpse into what's going on around you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So people, we tend to think as children of the Enlightenment that the more facts we know, the closer we can get into the more our brains can get packed with knowledge.
Right.
The more enlightened or evolved as a species or as people of faith we can be. And the church fell in love with this idea.
Yeah.
The church fell in love with this idea.
Just like
Maybe
everybody
even
else
more
did.
than just like everybody else did, right? People often forget that the evolution of the Bible in print text evolved as a document at the exact same time in mass production as the dictionary, right? And so this sort of construct that the Bible is produced as a book with a beginning and an end and as a source of knowledge that you close together and everything in it is a particular thing evolved at the same rate as sort of the dictionary, right? The first dictionaries and the first Bibles were mass produced within a similar sort of time frame of each other. And so together these technologies sort of open themselves, evolve together. And the church is thinking on how if we can just memorize it all, or if we can just know it all, or if we can just take it all in. Listening to you talk, I'm struck by how foolish of a if knowledge is the absolute end, that sort of endeavor can actually be.
Yeah, I teach pre-medical students. I'm sure there's probably some doctors in the room. But they really like memorizing stuff. Pre-meds just want to memorize things because that's what they're used to in their biology and anatomy classes and so forth. And I tell them there's virtually nothing to memorize in physics. I give them all the formulas. That's not the point. The point is not memorizing the formulas. And it really frustrates them because they have this idea that they've got to just memorize things and sort of fill up their shelves of knowledge in their brains, and so they'll be ready to go. Whereas physics is about understanding maybe 4 or 5 things really well at a deeper conceptual level. Once you get those, it's like everything else kind of flows from it. But even that's knowledge. Even that's knowledge. And I don't want this to come across the wrong way, but one thing that students are not comfortable with, and that people in general are not comfortable with, and I, on many days, am not comfortable with, is the idea that we as a species, human beings, really don't know that much. The ocean of things we don't know is vast. That's my starting point. And I'm not talking about me or Albert Einstein. I'm talking about humanity. What we know, yes, we can we can invent an AI that can produce, kind of a bland, 5-paragraph essay, and that's only going to get better. We can do all kinds of things. We can build some pretty fast computers. We can go to the moon. We can eventually go to Mars. But I really believe that the starting point of all understanding is knowing that we are infants when it comes to understanding. And you have to respect what I believe is a vast ocean of unknown things. And maybe not even things that we can know. And, I mean, why should it even be that we should be able to know everything? Why is it that, it wasn't until mathematics came, or they started applying mathematics to physics that it really started to work. It wasn't until, Galileo, Copernicus, Galileo, Kepler, they started using math, and all of a sudden, these phenomenon in the universe kind of tumbled together in this nice kind of tight way. Who's to say there's not another sort of step like that beyond math that would open up a whole new oceans of understanding? I just believe in our fundamental ignorance, and on my best days, which are maybe 1 out of 10, it keeps us humble, keeps me humble, and that is really the starting point.
Yeah,
whether it's religious knowledge or scientific knowledge, humility, and sort of knowing before whom you stand.
Yeah. It's a different posture to live with, though, right?
Oh, it is.
It's a totally different humility, particularly religious humility and humility about what we can understand about God is a totally different starting point than certainty, or than sort of arrogance around what it is that I think I know. For like,
Yes.
maybe certainty wasn't the right word there, but
Yeah.
but arrogance around what I
Yeah.
think I know. But that's where I think the beautiful thing is that if we can embrace that with the right prayer posture, and we can sort of allow ourselves to know that that God is not done working, that God is not done revealing God's self to us. I think this is another thing that we often sort of take for granted because the Bible is a book. Again, I go back to this sort of
Yep.
technological thing, that the Bible is a book, and so we think, what's the old saying? God said it, some people wrote it, they printed it, that's it, right? Or whatever the phrase is. Because it's a book, we can almost treat our faith like, if only I can get all this stuff downloaded and I can understand it perfectly, and maybe I need to take Greek or Hebrew, or I need to think like a first century Palestinian, or I need to, if only I can get that key just right, then my faith is all going to make sense in the world. Or I'm going to be able to make sense of all the manner of things that happen in my life.
Right.
And in truth, what I'm hearing you sort of invite us to think about is like, that has never been true.
That has never been true.
That has never been true. And we are constantly learning about about the nature of God. We are constantly learning about the nature of our relationships with each other. And we are constantly discovering together in our lives about what faith in the world can look like. So, a most important question, certainly not the last, but another of the most important questions, is there life on other planets?
Well, that's a question I actually get asked pretty often. I mean, a lot of NASA's current work, a lot of astronomy's current work is in the realm of astrobiology. And maybe you've not heard those two words put together before, but astrobiology. It's a big deal, and it's a really good question. Is there life out there? Now, my own, believe me, the questions that need to be answered in order to get to an answer to that question are many. It is not a simple, there are so many parts to that. But my bottom line is this. My view is that there is certainly some kind of life out there. And right now I'm confining ourselves to our galaxy. Just our own little 100,000 light year across galaxy, our own Milky Way, which, by the way, is a lovely galaxy. We live in a good neighborhood. But within that galaxy, I'm certain that there is some kind of life. But I'm equally as certain that it's probably only something like bacteria.
Mm-hmm.
As far as communicable life, which is really the key here, life that we could communicate with, not even like, I mean, my house cat, right? If there's a planet of house cats somewhere, we'll never know.
Right.
Okay, because they're never going to communicate with it. But as far as communicable civilizations go, I think in our galaxy, among the 200 billion or so stars in our galaxy, I would say probably not.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
The list of things that has to go right in order for us to be here, it is a super impressive list.
Uh-huh.
And I'm not going to bore you, but I could come up with, off the top of my head, at least 12 to 15 things, and I'm sure the list is longer than that. Probably 20 different things that have to be right.
Mm-hmm.
And each one of them is not necessarily a high probability situation. Each one of these 20. In other words, the odds of our being here, it's staggering. The odds against us being here are staggering.
Mm-hmm.
We may very well be the only communicable civilization in our galaxy. But there are hundreds of billions of galaxies even within our visible universe. But they're so far away that if we were to communicate with them, we'd send a message today, hello, and it would be 4.5 million years until we got a response saying, hi there. That's a long time. It'd be kind of hard to carry on a conversation that way.
Humility.
Humility.
Right? Yeah.
Yeah.
Humility and gift and grace in the midst of it all.
And that's really, I mean, paying attention is sort of the starting place in both theology and science.
Mm-hmm.
Paying attention.
Mm-hmm.
Whether it's paying attention to my parishioners when I was a pastor, hearing them say things, watching what they do, taking it in, noticing what's going on, or if you're sitting there in the lab and you've got, 2 gigabytes of data you're trying to sort through. Pay attention to what's in front of you. And you can't do that if you're full of yourself. You can't do that if you're worried about yourself. You can't do that if you're concerned about your problems. I got plenty of problems. But I can't take steps forward with God or with science until I just put it aside and look at what's in front of you.
In your other book, which, by the way, following this, we do have a couple of we have 2 of your books upstairs. One's called The Stars Beneath Us, Finding God in the Evolving Chaos. The other one's called Love and Quasars, An Astrophysicist Reconciles Faith and Science. They're both upstairs. You can pick one up afterwards in the Good News Cafe if you're interested. In Love and Quasars, you say the search for truth, be it scientific or spiritual, is never ending. Say a little bit more about how practically that applies to each of our lives in individual ways, as we also recognize that we live in a universe that's constantly expanding.
I'm a journey guy, not a destination guy. On balance, I really think that it's the traveling forward, it's the journey itself, and that's where the value is. I do believe in finding answers. I mean, I'm a scientist. I'm a physicist. Nothing makes me better. Nothing makes me feel better than when I pound my head against the wall for a week and I finally solve a problem I've been thinking about. And it's almost like a physical feeling in my brain. I feel like a click in my head. And it's a joyous moment. Or when I'm a bird watcher, I'm a birder. When I go out and I see a bird and I can't identify it, and then later on, either at the moment or later on, I'm able to identify it. And it just is super satisfying click of discovery. Small scales, big scales, doesn't matter. And I'm not trying to discount that. But I do think that if you don't enjoy, and if you don't, what's the word I'm trying to say, accept and embrace, for lack of a better word, the trip, the journey, the struggle, because that's what it is. Whether it's your personal life, whether it's religious life, whether it's scientific life, if you can't make peace with the struggle and name it for what it is, then you're not going to be able to experience that click, that feeling of satisfaction. But that's not it. It's not like when that key turns in your mind. It's not like, well, I'm done now. I'm not going to be thinking about any other situations. I'm done with all my struggling. And this is also true on interpersonal levels, right? Within families or with whatever, when you finally find a solution, which happens occasionally, even in families, you find a solution, that's not the end of it. You have to accept a lifelong struggle. Might be too dark of a word, but a lifelong search. Search, that's a good word.
That is a good word.
That's what you have to accept.
Yeah. And again, I hope what everyone is hearing here is that we know what we know.
Yeah.
Yeah?
Yeah.
We know what we know. The church has this profound ability in our everyday lives to mark time. It's what we do. With our gathering together for worship on a weekly basis, that is a marking of time with God. As Episcopalians, we say some of the same prayers over and over again through varying seasons of the life of the church to help us as humans living, again, in the words of the prayer book, on this fragile earth, our island home, that we are marking time in such a way so that we can make sense of what we know and to embrace the mystery of what we do not know in real time with one another. And so that through our words, our songs, our prayers, we can stay about the task of recognizing that what we know is what we know, and what we don't know yet, right? But that our common life and our common prayer together is worth marking, and it's worth living into.
And the reality of God is found in both what we know and what we don't know.
Yeah, exactly.
It's not one or the other.
It's not one or the other, right? And I think this is also what's so beautiful about the fact that as we learn more, those of you who've heard us talk in our last series talking about the prayer book, we talked about the three-legged stool of Richard Hooker's three-legged stool of the Episcopal faith, of tradition and scripture and reason, as these three parts of our tradition that we use to help us understand what it is that we know and to help us deal with the things that we learn as we make the journey of life together, right? And so what I hope that you're hearing is that the invitation into mystery, the invitation to be curious, is always held. It's not like we know these things, and because there's so much more that we don't know, we just need to kind of put what we know over here to the side. This is not about despair, right?
Right.
It's not about abandoning what we know. It's about appreciating the finiteness. It's about appreciating the basicness. It's about appreciating the faithfulness of what we know so that we can live our lives in community with each other. And then, I don't know if this is the right word, then we can be like wholly surprised.
Mm-hmm.
Like we can experience awe.
Yeah. Awe is a lovely thing. Everybody in the room has experienced it at some point or the other.
That we can name awe when something happens in our lives or along life's journey that we just totally didn't expect. We all know the experience of when things don't go the way that we had hoped or prayed or planned. And hopefully, on our journey, we also can pray about those moments where we experience awe and the expansion of our understanding of God's sort of intervention in our world. Because, I hope it's a true statement, that is the nature of the universe.
Yeah. On every level.
On every level. That God is not done working, and that we as people in community with one another have the ability to together experience and discover God working in new ways in our lives, because that's the nature of God and the nature of the universe in which we live, as we're coming to understand.
Mm-hmm.
All right. So what are some spiritual practices that you think we as people of faith that can help ground us in this reality of life with God?
Well, I mentioned a moment ago that I'm a birder. Mm-hmm. I was for a few years as a child, I was big into birds, just kind of cuckoo. I look back at like myself then, I'm like, boy, I was like a little off the rails. And then when I turned like 13, I discovered Led Zeppelin and girls, and I just forgot about birds. And then my dad picked it up. My dad picked up the birding thing. And he got a pretty impressive life list. He died in 2016. And within a year of that, I was out there birding again. Mm. And birding has been, without question, my number one spiritual practice. Mm-hmm. Absolutely. And it doesn't matter if I see any birds or not. Because it's not about seeing, the birds are nice, don't get me wrong. That's why I go out there. But there are days when I go out and it's just like, a couple sparrows and those cardinals, God, they're everywhere, Jeez, would you shut up and let me listen for somebody else? But even on those days, you know what I end up doing? Staring at trees, paying attention. I'm focused on something. It's essentially a practice, and I don't mean this in a negative way. I mean this in the most positive possible way. It's a practice of emptying my mind and focusing and paying attention on what's around me. You know, because it's a subtle thing. Birding is a subtle thing, and I like to do it in solitude because that's when I can let my mind get into this state. But it is I believe that kind of self-forgetfulness. I walk into the woods or I walk into the field, and I can just feel my self-consciousness just go away. And that kind of self-forgetfulness and that kind of paying attention is really, Simone Weil said something about this, said that is really the essence of prayer. And so I feel like when I go birding, and I do it every chance I can get, I always feel like it doesn't solve my problems, but when I come back into my life, I feel restored. And anything you do that helps you pay attention, it doesn't have to be birds. I mean, birds are obviously the best way to do it, but but anything, whether you like to draw, whether you like to tend a garden, anything, you like to sing, you like to take walks. I don't care what it is, and look around and notice things. Anyway, anything you can do to help you pay attention to the world around you. That is the beginning, in my view, and this might not be something I can develop at this point, but that kind of paying attention is at the root of both all good religion and all good science. It's the common cradle of the two.
I think we live in an age of hurry and go and anxiety. And the invitation.
Yeah. It is an invitation away from that.
The invitation to recognize that all of that stuff, we're not going to go into Einstein again, but all of that stuff really speeds us up in space and time. And that the ability to develop spiritual practices in our lives that slow us down, that make us pause, that make us get off the treadmill or whatever, the Peloton, whatever your sort of illustration is at this moment, and allow us to reconnect with both the vastness and the intimacy of God's love in our lives.
It's a nice balance.
Is just super critical because all is gift and all is grace.
It's hard to see that from inside the fray.
It is.
It's really hard to see that inside the anxiety of daily life, daily stress.
Yeah, and we have to find those practices. This is not a commercial for the Skyview app, but like birding, every once in a while I love to pull out the Skyview app as my own sort of way into that getting out of the busyness of it and to pay attention. And it's also interesting to watch the way in which the cosmos around us lines up with our spiritual marking of time sometimes in ways that are just absolutely beautiful. Y'all know we use the moon to decide when Easter is, don't you? Do you all, or is everybody aware of that, right? If you ever wondered why Easter hops around, it's because it has to do with full moons.
It's the first full moon. It's the first Sunday after the first full moon after the vernal equinox.
After the vernal equinox, that is correct. So if you ever wondered, like, does our faith, what do we really have to say about science? Well, a lot of our religious stuff is rooted in this deep appreciation for which we and cosmos together are constantly in conversation with one another as those on a real journey. Paul, I think you're going to come back and do some School of Faith stuff with us.
I'd love to.
And I'm thankful for the conversation that we've had today. for the calling us back to the intimacy of life and of pausing. We're glad that you're with us today.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Very much enjoyed it. Thanks for coming.
Much, Paul, for being here.
Thank you for listening. We invite you to subscribe, leave us a 5-star review, and connect with Christ Church Charlotte on social media. If you'd like to attend a Faith Forum live, visit christchurchcharlotte.org/Faith Forum to view dates and details of upcoming talks.